Hey guys, it's Marty and welcome to Two Line Slot Cars. Today we're going to talk about installing a Tek-Slot box. Maybe it should be called what not to do when you install a Tek-Slot box. A lot of you know that Area 51, George, our friend, he's a great tuner of cars. He's a great advocate, ambassador for the hobby of slot cars. George sent me his Tek-Slot box, wanted me to try it on my track. And you can guarantee that when you borrow something from somebody, you're probably going to break it. And that's what happened. So here are some things that you should not do with a Tek-Slot box. Actually, that's not what this video is about. It's about pointing out how to properly test your track so that you can install a Tek-Slot box and turn your Carrera Digital track into an analog track. So let me talk through some of the things that happened. I did everything that I thought I was supposed to do to prepare my track for the Tek-Slot box. I read the instructions multiple times, felt like I understood them. Now, I will admit that I don't know a ton about electricity. I know enough to be dangerous. And that's obvious. What I did was I burned up the Tek-Slot box. And I called George and he talked me off the cliff. I was so upset and angry at myself. I felt awful that he let me borrow this and I destroyed it in a matter of minutes. So let me tell you what happened. I installed the Tek-Slot box, followed the instructions. I coated the inside lane, which would be the green lane when you're looking at the Tek-Slot box. Everything went fine. Put a car on the inside lane. And for probably 45 minutes, I did laps with a handful of different cars. Everything was working just fine. Then I decided it was probably good to test the outside lane. And so I coded the outside lane to a controller, like you're supposed to. And that's when all heck broke loose. I put a car on it. It immediately started, it was running horribly, like it was out of gas if you've run fuel simulation. So it was just barely moving around the track. The computer started going, the CU unit started going crazy, lights blinking and beeping. And then I looked down at the power supply. The voltage dropped down to like 7 volts, 6 volts. And the amps spiked 8, 9, 10 amps. And the fan kicked on the power supply. And I sort of panicked and I turned the power off. And immediately I could smell burnt electronics. And I knew that I totally messed something up. So I shut the power off, unplugged everything. Then I called George, and George was like, "Oh, Marty, I'm sure everything's fine. I think you're exaggerating. There's no way that you burn up the Tek-Slot box." And I'm like, "George, I can smell it. It's bad. Like, it is really bad." So after I calmed down, took a deep breath, I took the track apart. I took the CU apart from the rest of the track, and then I took a chip out of another Carrera Digital car. And I opened up the Tek-Slot box and I discovered that the chip was burnt. And so I unplugged that chip and plugged in a chip that I knew that was good. And then I put power back to just the CU unit. So I eliminated the rest of my layout. That means that I had lane isolation. I knew that the left lane was not connected to the right lane in any way. Put a car on it, coated it, everything worked fine. So after I opened up the box, I discovered I only burn up one chip, not both chips, which was good news, and the fact that the unit was working. And I replaced the burnt chip with a good chip, and it was working. So good news, pretty easy fix. It's going to be the cost of a new Carrera Digital 124 chip to install in the box. So here's what you need to understand, and I think that we need to go to the track for me to explain this. So let's head over to the track, and I'll give you commentary on the things that you need to do before you install a Tek-Slot box on your Carrera track. Okay, guys, here's what we're looking at. This is the Tek-Slot box in the CU that it comes installed on. And as you can see, I have the box sort of opened up. We can take a look inside, but I've rewired a chip, as you can see, to replace the chip that went bad in the box. So let me explain what you need to do to understand isolation when it comes to lane isolation. When you read the instructions, it tells you that you want to test both the positive and the negative sides of the rails to see if they're isolated. And so basically, you use the ohm reading on your multimeter. And so you set it to ohms. Okay, and then what you'll do, the left side of the rail on the left lane and the left side of the rail, you will have a reading on your voltmeter. Now, when you test the opposite side, which would be the right side, your left, and the right rail in the other lane, you'll notice that you have an ohm reading. So that means that both lanes are connected and you do not have true isolation. But this actually could be a false reading. And so here is what I'm going to explain that I didn't do up front. When you read the instructions, it says to remove the old CU and then test the lanes. But it's slightly confusing. I had posted on the Tek-Slot Facebook group, and Joe has been amazing through this whole thing. He has answered all my questions, and it's just been a fantastic experience trying to troubleshoot this. But basically, he told me that I had an issue with my power taps. And I reviewed all my power taps. I didn't see any issues. And so, that was the problem. But he mentioned a way to test that is not in the instructions. And so I think this is where the confusion happens for people, and people are hesitant. This is really an easy install, but you have to make sure that your lanes are isolated or you're going to burn up a chip. Okay? Just like I did. And I don't want you to make the same mistake that I made. What I recommend is installing the Tek-Slot CU. Your track is complete. Then what Joe mentioned was to turn your Tek-Slot box to the analog, but no power on the CU. So do not turn the power on the CU. Just flip the switch down to analog. Now you're in analog mode with no power. And that's when you want to test the rails. From your point of view, it's backwards because we're going the direction that the cars are moving, right? So in the left lane, which would be your right lane, we check the left rails and there will be an ohm reading. So here we go. As you can see, ohm reading. So we have some resistance there. Now, in the analog mode, you should not have an ohm. You should not get a reading from the right rails. We'll test the right rails. No reading. That means that you have lane isolation. Now, what it looks like if you don't have lane isolation, it would look like this. You would have an ohm reading on the left rails, your right, and then you would have an ohm reading on both sets of rails. That's the problem. But I'm testing it in digital mode, and digital doesn't care because cars run on both lanes. The chip in the car is what's controlling the current. So there's current running on both sides. It doesn't really matter. But when you go to analog, it needs separation. They cannot be connected in any way. So the only thing you have to worry about is if you have a lane changer that's one of those corner lane changers, left or right turns, you do not have to worry about double changers, pit lanes, and the single changers, the left to right and the right to left. You do not have to worry about those. Those are not crossed over. But for some reason, Carrera wires those corner turns with a crossover, and that causes the lanes to not be the lanes to be connected in some way. So George did an awesome thing, and I recommend that you do the exact same thing. He labeled the bottom of the CU unit so that he could match up what was happening here on the track with all the power taps. And so you can see we have the track flipped over. So you want to mark the direction that the cars will be moving. So I flipped it over, but the direction that they move is still from right to left. And so you can see you have yellow negative on the outside and right's positive, red, on the inside rail of the right side lane. Remember, this is upside down. And then you have black is negative on the inside rail and white is positive on the outside rail in the left lane. And so he's got them marked right and left, so we have the lanes correct. And then yellow minus red positive, black minus white positive. And then you can see he had it marked here, down here, so that you can make sure that you're getting your wiretaps in the proper place. That is a great way to keep your wiring organized. So then you do the exact same thing, mark your direction, and then mark how you have your positive and negatives, red, yellow, black, white, on all of your power taps. So marking them is important to keep lane isolation. Since we have the Tek-Slot Box open, there's some of our buddy Daryl's cars that he let us borrow. A Revo Slot, the world's fastest Civic. This car is crazy fast. Yeah, Thunderslot Elva, which has become my favorite, and then 2 Camaros on the Trans Am series. So fantastic cars. I'll do a video on some of those cars. And most of the people don't ever have to open theirs up because they didn't mess up like I did. But the screws are on the top. Pretty easy to open the box up. And you can see there's a lot of wiring going on. But the basics are there are 2 Carrera Digital chips. And you can see the one in there is fried pretty bad. But the concept of this box is brilliant, just so you understand. So now what we do is CU's on. We're in digital mode. Now digital cars work. So we'll flip over to analog, and then we'll turn the A power on. And you can see we have a green light on the right, and a blue light on the left. So green is my inside lane, blue is my outside lane. That light actually represents the headlights on a car. So understand that what you're doing is you're chipping the lane, not the car. And so instead of the chip being on the other side of the rails, it's before the rails, and that's how you're controlling power, and that's how you're able to run analog cars. So basically, you'd hit the code button, just like you do, and then hold down this red button. It turns off the other chip, and then you could code just like you'd code normally. Then let go, and then now your controller is coded to that inside lane. And then you do the same thing for the outside lane, and you're good to go. Okay, guys, there you have it. That is the one mistake you do not want to make when installing a Tek-Slot box. I tried to go over all the details, but really understand that as long as you've got your lanes separated, they're not connected in any way. You get 0 ohm reading on that right rail. You're good to go. When you look at the instructions for Tek-Slot, it says the one key item is lane isolation. In a digital track, Carrera jumpers both lanes together, but in analog, they need to be modified so that not only the CU, that means that the responsibility of the customer is to ensure that all power taps are connected as described below. And so in their instructions, it's very obvious how you connect your power taps. Okay, that's where I made the mistake. I looked at them, I kept looking at them, I kept verifying that they were incorrect, and I had one pair swapped. It's really easy to do. So, but if you label your track, just put some masking tape on the bottom, painter's tape, and write out what you need and color code it, it's really easy to get your power taps correct, especially if you move your track and reassemble and disassemble. All right, but in the instructions it says, before installing the modified control unit and with the original digital CU removed, check connectivity from lane 1 positive to lane 2 positive and lane 1 negative and lane 2 negative with an ohm meter. There may be connectivity between the positive left rails, but the negative right rails should be open or no connection. Okay, so with that, I had mine were open when I did not have the CU installed. So, but when I asked Joe the question and he said, hey, check this, put the CU in and throw it in analog mode, that was the true test for me. And so that's what I would recommend. Even though this says to do it without the CU installed, I still, for some reason, had an open lane on those rails. And so I thought I was good. I introduced the short when I programmed the outside lane and put a car on it. And that's when everything went to heck. So put the CU unit in, no power plugged into it. Not plugged in the power supply, just put the CU unit with the Tek-Slot Box in, flip it over to analog, and then run your tests. And if you have nothing on the right rails, the negative rails, you will be good. That means you have lane isolation, and that's the key to making this work. I just want to help keep people from making the same mistake that I made. Now, it's a $30 fix. I'll buy a new Carrera chip. I'll plug it in. It's plug and play. Joe did an awesome job by leaving the plugs on and soldering plugs in, so it's just a swap of a chip. Easy fix, and I'm good to go. I pulled a chip out of another car. It's running. I'll show some footage of me running the Thunderslot Elva. So it works, and it works great. This is a great device for converting your Carrera Digital to analog. There are other options. The Omnibox is out there. The Omnibox is a completely different animal. It does not do lane chipping. It basically converts your entire track into an analog track. I don't know all the details on how that works, but I'm going to find out because I'm curious to know. Remember, just make sure that you have lane isolation. Do this one check, and you'll be good to go. So I probably made this video way longer than it needed to be, but if you like this kind of content and you want to learn more about the Tek-Slot Box and slot cars and how to burn up Carrera digital chips, check out my videos. Hit the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up. Share my videos. I really appreciate all of you guys tuning in and giving me great feedback and critiques and all the other things that come with having a YouTube channel. I'm here to help you and help myself be better at this hobby. I'm passionate about it. I love this hobby. The deeper I go, the more I enjoy it. And guys, thanks. I really appreciate it. So give me a thumbs up. Go hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell so you get notified anytime I put new videos out there. And go track down a Tek-Slot Box if you want to go analog. It's fantastic. Just don't burn up the chip. Just don't short out your track, and you'll be good. So hopefully you learned how not to do that in this video. Guys, thanks. Go have fun racing.